Yes, thanks very much to Mike. Right now on BBC News, it's time for your questions answered. You've been sending in your questions on the latest restrictions in England, what we can and can't do, and the prospect of a coronavirus vaccine. Here to give us the answers to your questions are infectious disease management expert Dr. Bharat Pankhania and virologist Professor Jonathan Ball. Good to have both of you with us as ever. Great to have you joining us again to give your analysis, your views, and we have got a lot of questions, so let's see how many we can get through. I might move you on if your answers are a little bit too long. I'll apologise in advance, just so we can get through lots. Bharat, I'm going to begin with you. Matthew in North London says, both my elderly parents are currently in hospital for surgeries. Am I allowed to move into their house for a week to look after them once they're out of hospital? I live with my partner, so have not been able to form a support bubble with them thus far.
I look at this as essential healthcare to his parents. So prepare yourself, don't mingle with other people, and make sure that you are not a contact, a case, and then move in and stay there and look after them. That's what I would do. OK, clear-cut advice there. I hope that helps, Matthew, and I hope your parents recover well. Jonathan, Anne Rogers in Cheshire says, I live in Cheshire and my partner lives in West Yorkshire. Can I still visit him once a week?
Well, at the moment, the advice is to minimise the amount of travel, and obviously that would require some travel. Also, we're not to stay with other people. We can meet one other person, single people can meet one other person outdoors, and so it might be permissible under that rule. And of course, the other thing to bear in mind is it's not clear whether or not these people might be living at home. If one of them is living alone, then they could potentially form a support bubble. Whilst government advises to try and form support bubbles quite locally, it's still permissible to travel for that purpose. OK, so some possibilities there, depending on the circumstances, Anne.
Bharat, this from Jerry Stafford in Milton Ernest. I have been taking a friend to hospital for radiotherapy treatment for his cancer. Can I continue to do this? So quite a similar theme to number one, I think, in terms of the healthcare.
I agree, and it is similar to number one. And again, my advice to Jerry is you make sure that you are not mingling with too many other people outside your connection with this person that you're taking them to the hospital, because they are having radiotherapy. They will be vulnerable. So keep yourself clean, so to speak, and carry on doing the good work.
And Jerry maybe should wear a mask and so on. Absolutely. In the car with his friend. OK, Jonathan, this is from Diane, who says over 60s are classed as clinically vulnerable, but still have to work until they're 66. Where is the support for people in this age bracket?
OK, well, Diane, this was one I had to, think about very carefully, because the rules at the moment, the guidance at the moment, is that people are defined as clinically vulnerable if they're over 70 years of age rather than 60. Now, it could be that you're clinically vulnerable and less than 70 years of age if you've got specific health problems. And the best way to understand whether or not you have those is whether or not you get invited for a flu vaccine every year. So it's things like diabetes, chronic lung disease, things like that. And unfortunately, the only advice for people at increased risk, so if you're over 60, you're at increased risk, is to ensure that you're very careful in terms of social distancing, also personal hygiene. And then finally, it's also worth bearing in mind that there is a group of extremely clinically vulnerable people, but they would have received a letter advising them, firstly, that they are extremely vulnerable, but also the sorts of help that's available to them.
OK, Diane, I hope that's helped with your question. Bharat, this question from Sophie Coyne. The government know that sport is essential for mental health and physical well-being. Why has it been taken away during this lockdown, and when will it return? The likes of grassroots sport, sport for people with disabilities in particular, Sophie asks about.
Yeah, and I understand Sophie's concerns, and I very much agree with her. The trouble is, how do you provide for every group, every sector at a difficult time like this one? So what the government is saying is outdoor activities where you are going for walks, runs, etc. on your own are okay, whereas group sporting activities have been closed and curtailed. The trouble is, we are where we are, and we need to reduce the case numbers. Therefore, what I say is work around it and go for long walks, go outside, don't meet with other people, and that is your alternative sports whilst we are in this situation.
And hopefully with a big push from everyone, we can get back to a situation where stuff starts to open up again.
Yes.
Jonathan, Ros Davis in Bolton asks, can I take my car for its MOT?
Well, Ros, fortunately you can. There are a number of businesses that are allowed to stay open during lockdown. That includes petrol stations, car repair, garages where they would carry out the MOT. So if they're allowed to stay open, then that means that you're able to take your car for the MOT. OK,
Ros, hope it passes. Bharat, why are plans not yet ready to vaccinate the population at a high rate as soon as a vaccine is approved, asks Brian Whittingham in Dorchester.
Yes, to Brian and to all our viewers and listeners, I would say there are a lot of plans being made to give the vaccine in large numbers to all the groups. But first, what we have to do is target the at-risk groups. So that would be people who become very ill were they to get infected. And of course, frontline health workers and frontline other staff. So there are plans, lots of plans are being made. And I would say in the first instance, not everyone will get the vaccine. It has to be targeted to the vulnerable groups first.
And another vaccine question for you, Jonathan, from Colin English. Are there different strains of the coronavirus circulating in Britain, asks Colin. Do they each need their own vaccine?
Well, as a virologist, it's a great question for me to answer. It's something close to my heart. We're interested in how the virus might be mutating, how it might be evolving, and what impact that might have on its behaviour, but also whether or not the vaccines that are under development will work. We know that there are distinct strains of viruses that have emerged over the past few months, and they have spread around the world. There's some evidence as well that they might change some of the behavior of the virus. They might impact on how well it infects human cells, for example. And there's also emerging evidence that there might be some changes that could have an impact on some of the immune responses, antibody responses that we hope vaccines might produce. Now, the good news is that vaccines generally, and indeed your immune system, generally produces lots of different antibodies and lots of different killer cells that go around hunting cells and destroying them and destroying the virus that way. So we're hoping that the rates of evolution that we're seeing are low enough not to give us big problems.
Perfect question for you, Jonathan. Yes. Bharat, Caitlin in Manchester, I beg your pardon, asks, should schools and colleges shut during this lockdown due to loads of students spreading the virus? So Caitlin's question presupposes that the students are spreading the virus. And I know there's a lot of work going on, research going on. To what extent that is the case?
Yes, so we do know that actually young people can get infected, but they're not very infectious. Older children may be infected and infectious. The problem is this, that education is equally important, and we need to balance the scale about, do we stop education or do we continue in a safe way? My view is we continue education in a safe way. I have advocated for many months that we enable remote teaching where possible. So you swap around. You have fewer children at school and the other children are at home, and you swap them around to keep the school's environment safer. I think that would be a way forward. I have also seen private schools racing ahead with their remote teaching. Therefore, I feel that our government could invest in giving internet access and computers to poor families so that they can also do home education.
It's definitely a hot topic for discussion, that one, isn't it? Jonathan, this question from Linda in Ufkum. I think I've pronounced that properly, Linda. I do hope I have. Linda has a difficult situation. She needs to travel from Devon to Nottingham to attend a close family member's early morning funeral and asks if she can stay at a hotel the night before.
Well, I'm sorry about Linda's sad predicament. Now, thankfully, the government are aware of the needs for certain activities to go on to allow travel. So certainly travel to funerals is permissible. And if you do need to have overnight accommodation to be able to attend that funeral, then again, that's allowed. So fingers crossed you can find somewhere suitable close by.
OK. Bharat, Muna Ali in Chipping Barnet asks, my parents live abroad and will be coming to visit me. They are planning to stay in my house while they are in England. Is that allowed?
This is difficult because you are actually forming a new bubble with your parents coming from abroad. Now, if they're allowed to come into the country, which they are, then they need to also exercise quarantine measures, not only visit and stay at your home, but be quarantined if they're coming from an at-risk country. And so there is a little bit of ambivalence. I would say if they come, please observe which country they're coming from and be careful because you need to observe quarantine regulations as well as stay at your home.
And perhaps if they can delay for a little bit, if that's possible, it might be a good idea. Jonathan, John in Mablethorpe asks, we have just sold a house in France. Can we travel there to empty it of our furniture and belongings?
Okay, this seems quite a complicated scenario. I'm assuming that it may well be a second home. Let's start in terms of moving house and moving home. That's permissible under the current guidance, and so if it fits that category, then that's fine. If it is a second home, then that's slightly more complicated. It's also further complicated by the fact that this is a home in France that requires international travel, which again is actively discouraged apart from specific activities like work, for example. And therefore, I think at the moment it sounds like there's more things stacked against doing it than there is to actually go and empty the house of its belongings. Remember as well that if it is permissible and you do go out there, that when you return, you would have to quarantine as well. So that adds a level of complication. But removal firms certainly can continue to operate. So if one of those is going to go out, empty the house and bring it back, then that's fine.
It is a complicated scenario, isn't it? A couple of questions about childcare now. Bharat, Richard Saunders in Bristol says, can my wife and I still visit my daughter's house to look after our grandchildren while she works?
Yes, so this would come under the category essential childcare. And again, you can do it, but please be careful. Just make sure your circle, Richard, in Bristol, is small so that you can continue safely between your home and your daughter's home to look after your grandchildren. It is permitted. OK, I've got a couple that you haven't seen, either of you, but I'm confident you'll be able to answer the questions for us. A couple have come in the last few minutes. Lucy Morris on childcare. She says, I'm in an informal childcare bubble. Is my mum friend allowed in my house and vice versa? Are the adults allowed to basically mingle at all within each other's houses?
I think we need to carefully differentiate between the two activities. There's one which is providing childcare, which is permissible, but the other, which is potentially adults being able to socialise whilst that is going on. Unfortunately, that would be against the rules and regulations. And of course, what it does do is increase the risk of virus being transmitted. We need to get back to the basics and remember why this guidance is in place, and what it's designed to do is limit the amount of time that people mix with each other so that we can limit the transmission of the virus and bring cases under control. So
it's just drop off and pick up and that's it. And I think we can squeeze in one more, Bharat, with you from Peter Lewis, who says he's going to be 80 on the 22nd. Happy birthday in advance, Peter. He lives on his own and asks what he will be able and not able to do or to go.
Peter, happy birthday to you. But look, Peter, you are in your 80s. My advice to you would be try and enjoy your birthday, but don't mix with other people. That would put you at risk, and it would be so unfortunate if you got an infection. So stay as you are, preserve your status quo, make many phone calls, do a video call, but don't mingle with a group of people. That would be unsafe.
Yeah, OK. Well, Dr. Bharat Pankhania and Professor Jonathan Ball, a real pleasure to hear from you as ever. Thank you so much for answering all of those questions. Thank you to you, our viewers, for sending them in. I'm sorry if we didn't get through all of them, but hopefully, as ever, we've covered a lot of themes that will be of interest to you and useful to you.